Welcome everybody to the Maroon Spirit 954 channel on YouTube. The purpose of this channel is to educate those American descendants. Next is the definition of school. School, any institution at which instruction is given in a particular discipline. So what's that look like for a Generation X American descendant of slavery? That looks like in elementary school, you grow up learning about Mary Poppins, O. Susanna, Paul Bunyan, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. All of these people you're schooled into believing they're your heroes, when actually they were your enemies. The definition of education: an enlightening experience. Those that tune in to the Maroon Spirit channel look forward to getting educated and receiving an enlightening experience. The next order of business on any podcast will be a Black inventor. We're going to start off with T as in Tom, A as in Alpha, Carrington. He invented the range, federal patent number 180323, July 25th, 1876. So for all my American descendants of slavery out there that have kids, every time you cook a meal for that kid, remind yourself, your ancestor invented the range. The next order of business is to dissect the American descendant of slavery movement. I'm the type of individual, I don't associate myself with anything unless I do my own due diligence and see if it applies to me. So let's take the first word, American. Let's see what the definition of American says. American, noun, a native or citizens of the United States. Now, which one applies to the American descendants of slavery? Can't be citizen, because the European established the United States government July of 1776 in declaring their independence from Great Britain and its king. That had nothing to do with us. The European declared independence from the king in Britain. So we have to be native. How are we native Americans? Easy. When you look at history, we were on this land under slavery laws prior to 1776. That makes us American. Let's take the next word, descendants. Descendants is a noun. One who follows in the bloodline of an ancestor, either lineally or collaterally. So if I'm native to the land, a descendant means I'm tied by blood to natives of this land. Let's take the word slavery. Not slave, slavery. That is a legal term. Slavery. A situation in which one person has absolute power over the other. I stand corrected. Slavery. A situation in which one person has absolute power over the life, fortune, and liberty of another. So upon the Europeans' arrival on the land called North America, when they created legal structure for their operation, they decided to play a skin game. They chose the color black to legally enslave. So when they set up shop on this land, the group of people that they wanted absolute power over their life, fortune, and liberty happened to be dark-skinned people. The reason why I wanted to read those definitions is I've heard a lot of different people talk about the ADOS movement, American Descendants of Slavery, and what I noticed is that last word, I've heard a lot of people use the word slave. No human being is a slave. Slavery is a legal term. You're a human being. Another human being decided to play Lord and God over you. Before we get into the practical program of action and the purpose of this channel, there's a lot of offense, and much respect to those YouTube channels that are providing offense via information to our specific group about the political and legal games that are being played with our group on the 400-year milestone of being legally enslaved on this land, 1619 to 2019. So here we are. This broadcast is being made on September 30th, 2019. And I've taken it upon myself to come up with a practical program of action that we all can apply in order to bring this system in alignment with natural order. Before I get into the 12-step practical program of action that every individual American descendant of slavery can take in their individual lives without causing any threat or harm to their personal place of employment, their business. These are all things that we can do pretty much anonymously when it comes to job and business related matters. But before I get into those 12 practical steps, I want to state briefly that this YouTube channel is in honor of my 12-year-old son, whom this past summer was told by his father and me to take 1 hour a day and read the Miseducation of the Negro. And every day, I would quiz him on what he learned or what jumped out at him in that book. And in having a dialogue with your child, with your son, about our plight, and to hear his open-mindedness about the matter, and his strong belief that we can change, and that he learned more in 1 summer than he's learned in 6 years of school, that motivated me to take time to not only help him, but to help all other young American descendants of slavery know that we have a very rich history that is not being told. And if you gain more from this channel than you do in school about your history, then we have work to do. And here's the work that must be done. 12 steps and a practical program of action for American descendants of slavery. Step 1, learn about the estate or estates your family originated from. Step 2, learn who established that estate. Step 3, what nation and confederacy had jurisdiction over that area prior to the European. Step 4, ask all nonprofit organizations you attend, what's your position on reparations? Step 5, they either support it or they don't. No support, no money. However, if they support it, then immediately children and adults need weekly classes free of charge about steps 1, 2, and 3, and field trips to American descendants of slavery landmarks in that city, county, and state. Step 6, don't support European holidays for the remainder of the year. Step 7, avoid spending money with any small business that doesn't hire your people. Step 8, all businesses need operating cash. Spend money with American Black businesses. Step 9, all other groups rely on our energy and operating cash to survive. Set the trends of making other groups follow our lead and support our services, products, and entertainment. Step 10, the U.S. government is bankrupt. The Federal Reserve prints money, i.e. quantitative easing. It also burns money, i.e. quantitative tightening. The U.S. dollar hasn't been backed by gold since Richard Nixon in 1971. The government operates off the full faith of its citizens to pay debt and taxes. American descendants of slavery no longer have faith in the U.S. government. This is why financial support will be altered, stopped, and redirected. Step 11, teach your kids 1 hour a day about their history on this land. Subsection A, have them learn about a Black inventor. Subsection B, have them know about our heroes. Subsection C, they should know the European that conquered the estate you live in. Subsection D, they should know the nation of people prior to European invasion militarily and culturally. Step 12, practicing these steps will educate us on the land we're claiming, America, and attaches us to the history and laws of the U.S. government. Every estate American descendants of slavery live in should have steps 1, 2, and 3 advertised via social media, radio, and newspaper. This in 13 weeks, 1 fiscal quarter, will bring us together for our common cause. Now, these 12 practical steps of action, nobody at your job needs to know that you're not supporting small businesses that don't hire your own people. That's nobody's business. What I notice about our people is we complain a lot about different things that happen to us on individual and on group levels. But this is an experiment. This is a 13-week experiment. Businesses worldwide operate on a 13-week calendar. October 1st, 2019 will be the last fiscal quarter of the year 2019. This happens to also be the 400-year milestone of our enslavement on this land under European government. i.e. the United States government. So it's real simple. When the challenge was brought to me by my son, what is a goal? To quote Earl Nightingale from The Strangest Secret, if you ask the captain of a ship, what's your destination, he'll tell you Jamaica, Haiti, Africa, the Bahamas. He knows where he's going. He's not going to lift the anchor and let that ship drift at sea. And so what we're doing as a group of people is we're drifting in the world of business. We have a Black agenda. It's on ADOS101.com. But there's no practical program of action that we all can come together, first starting with the individual. We all have to get up and look ourselves in the mirror and look our kids in the face as well, and ask ourselves the question: am I willing to change my thinking and change my habits? And the only way that we can do that, just like on a personal level, when it's time to get your personal money in order with your personal household finances, the first thing you have to do, assuming that you are working or you're employed, you have to look at your expenses. Where's my money going? And so it's no different with this particular movement. We have to all stop and look at, where am I spending my money? And we have to purposefully, each and every one of us on an individual basis, every day we wake up and walk out the door, we have power. We have control. Everybody wants our money. We have to make the decision to decide who gets our money. And we're also going to learn how much power we have when we start being very choosy about who we spend our money with. So this is something on an individual basis first. And individually, as each and every one of us make that conscious decision every day before we walk out of the house, it becomes a group phenomenon, and we all get on code. The next order of business that I'd like to get into is steps 1, 2, and 3. And what I'm going to do is lay out an outline on my own personal experience, and I'm opening the door for my New York people, my Jersey people, my Virginia people, my Ohio people, my California people, my Texas people, my Alabama people, my Mississippi people, my Louisiana people. All of us can apply steps 1, 2, and 3 and educate all of us collectively. Let's take step 1. Step 1 says learn about the estate or estates your family originated from. Myself personally, I grew up in South Florida. My mother and my father are from Georgia. My dad's from Savannah. My mom's from Augusta. My dad's mom is from Savannah. And that's as far as we can go on my dad's side up to this point. That takes us back to about 1910, 1913, somewhere around there. On my mom's side of the family, all of my bloodline resides in Georgia as well. We can go back to about 1903 on my mom's side. So even though I grew up in South Florida, my bloodline is in Georgia. So let's get into the estate of Georgia. Before I go into the estate of Georgia, I want to share something real quick. Growing up in South Florida, you always look at North Florida as country. What I've learned in doing this research is that's due to miseducation, because North Florida is the greatest history of American descendants of slavery on this land. The intro song that you heard, the Seminole Wars song, I'm sure everybody that heard that song, the first thing they thought about was the Florida State Seminoles. Your mind went to sports. What you didn't know is that war song is the war song of your ancestors fighting the United States government in 3 different wars to remain free. So the miseducation is real. Here they've taken our war song, memorialized it within a sport, and even took our hero, which is Chief Osceola. Every American descendant of slavery now knows Chief Osceola's name, and he must be honored among the Maroon Spirited people because he led a war against the United States government, which is operated and managed by Europeans, for freedom. That's our hero. They have Andrew Jackson on a $20 bill. That's one of the European heroes and their American history. Our hero of that same time frame in history would be Chief Osceola. So what happens with people who grew up in Florida, we have been miseducated so much, and also in North America, but I'm saying Florida because I grew up in Florida. We've been miseducated so bad that we don't even know that if you grew up in the state of Florida, how is it that American descendants of slavery aren't learning about the Seminole Wars? This man has a courthouse named after him. He has a county in Florida, Osceola County. And he also has counties and other estates under the United States government. So let's get back into the estate that my bloodline comes from, Georgia. Georgia was the last of the original 13 colonies. Georgia was established by James Edward Oglethorpe and 114 colonists that arrived at the future site of Savannah. Savannah is not the original name that natives of this land call that area. Understand that. Savannah was also the first capital of Georgia, and it's named after King George II of Britain. So understand, a king in Britain paid to send James Oglethorpe, who is a general in the military, to come to what we now know as Georgia. He sent a warlord, a military officer. What do military officers' first order of business? What are they first taught? How to kill. So you sent a general over here to establish a colony. Had it named after you. And we run around and only thing we know as American descendants of slavery is the state of Georgia. But we're claiming to be American. If we're claiming to be American, then we ought to know about the history of the land that our ancestors died on. That's the whole purpose of step one. So we have to get our concepts right. If we are American, which we are, then we ought to know about the land of our ancestors. That automatically weeds out any immigrants. Our lack of education gives other people talking points when they really need to sit down, shut up, sit in a corner, and learn about who we are. Oglethorpe is sent by King George II. He negotiates a treaty with the Yamacraw people. So the people that were here were Yamacraw. The chief name was Chief Tamachichi. So Chief Tamachichi signs a business contract, the highest contract on the land, which is a treaty, with James Oglethorpe on behalf of King George II. Oglethorpe then designs the city on a grid plan with 60 by 60 tithing lots and 60 by 60 trust lots arranged into wards. So anybody that's been to Savannah, you'll notice that when you go into the historical downtown district, it's set up in wards. The properties are perfectly square. But go back. 60 by 60 tithing lots. So depending on where your property is located within the city of Savannah, a percentage of your income is either going into the tithing trust or it's going into the trust lots trust. I'm going to repeat that. Oglethorpe designed the city of Savannah on a grid plan with 60 by 60 tithing lots and 60 by 60 trust lots arranged into wards. You don't own anything under the United States government. Why? It is a trust. It's already been set up. You get the privilege and liberty to operate and hold on to a driver's license or a car or buy a house. But everybody knows if you don't pay the taxes on anything that you get a certificate of title, you don't own it. This is why. We're under military occupation and we're all put in trust. Let's move forward. The trustees originally banned slavery, hard liquor, Catholics, and lawyers. So for those of us that don't believe it's a trust, you don't understand the history of the estate that you live in. That's why I'm trying to be very particular with my words when I say estate. This is a trust that you're operating in, that all of us are operating in. And I can only speak for the estate of Georgia because that's where my bloodline originates at. I look forward to learning about New York. I look forward to learning about New Jersey. I look forward to all of my brothers and sisters of American descendants of slaves coming together and implementing these steps so that we can get a better understanding of how we have been enslaved under this government and how we can recorrect it. So even though slavery was banned when they set up the colony of Georgia in the first city, Savannah, which was the capital, enslaved people were brought from Charleston, South Carolina to clear the land. I've already said that James Oglethorpe was a general in the military, but James Oglethorpe also has a lot of memorials in his honor within the estate of Georgia. Just to name a couple of them, he has an Oglethorpe University in Atlanta, in the Brookhaven area to be exact. So most of us American descendants of slavery, we're riding around that if you live in the city of Atlanta, You don't even know that your number one enemy, James Oglethorpe, and we'll get into why he's number one enemy. He's being honored by Europeans. History shows he's your enemy. But he has a university right in the city of Atlanta. He also has a bronze memorial in Chippewa Square in Savannah, facing south toward Florida with his sword drawn. There's a reason why that memorial is positioned due south in Savannah toward Florida with his sword drawn. Now, the lie that the European tells is due to the Spanish War in Florida. However, guess what wars they omitted? The Seminole Wars. The colony of Georgia was set up to stop American descendants of slavery from running away from plantations. It was designed to be a buffer colony because they had a problem with trying to enslave our group. But that is never told to us. What's always told to us is the storyline of those that had broken spirits, of those that did not want to fight for freedom. So we were always told about the house Negro and the field Negro. We were never told about those Maroon Spirited people that weren't with the games. So getting a little bit more into that, Georgia was established to provide a military buffer between South Carolina and Maroon/Seminole, Florida. The word Maroon, wear that word with honor. Maroon is what Europeans and Spaniards called runaways. Own that word. Those are ones that buck the system. Those are the ones of us that were not going to work to death for nothing. Those are the ones of us that hit the Underground Railroad, where we get the names of the Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was put on a pedestal and much respect to her, and she is one of our heroes that we need to be honoring her on her birthday, or we need to pick our own day and honor her. But there were hundreds of thousands of Harriet Tubman spirited people, men and women and children, that hit the Underground Railroad, going to Florida, which was Spanish controlled, which was free land for runaways, aka Maroons. Georgia also, being a buffer between South Carolina and Florida, understand something. King George II had a problem back in Britain. He had a lot of people in his debtor prison, and he had a lot of unemployed people. So guess who populated the colony of Georgia once James Oglethorpe established it? Those that were in financial slavery and in debtor prisons, and those that were unemployed. He needed a group of people that would fight for something. So think about it. If I got you in a debtor's prison in England, and I send you to a colony that I've established called Georgia in North America, I say, hey, you work X amount of years, you earn your freedom. Now, working those X amount of years might entail killing runaways, building roads, etc. But the whole idea is we have to understand why Georgia was formed and what population of people came over here. It was your pauper status people, your unemployed, those that were in debt, which is another form of bondage or enslavement. So that's step one. Learn about the estate or estates your family originated from. So we understand that Georgia is an estate, it's a trust. It was set up as such in 1733 with 114 men. We understand it was set up in wards, 60 by 60 tithing lots, 60 by 60 trust lots. Let's get into step 2. Who established that estate? James Oglethorpe. Step 3. What nation and confederacy had jurisdiction over that area prior to the European? Prior to Savannah, Georgia, that area was called Yamacraw Bluff. The Confederacy was the Creek Confederacy. So what we now know as Georgia was a Creek Confederacy. One of the nations in that confederacy was the Yamacraw. Now, a lot of y'all are saying, man, I've heard that word confederacy before, because during the Civil War, the South became the Confederate. So here's a question for you. If Oglethorpe was sent over here by a king, that's a one-person rulership. How did Europeans over time decide to set up a confederacy? It's because they learned from the people who were already here how they operated on this land. So those of us that live in Georgia current day understand, prior to it being called Georgia and prior to Savannah being called Savannah, Savannah was Yamacraw Bluff. And before the estate of Georgia was called Georgia, it was a part of the Yamacraw Nation. And the Yamacraw Nation was a part of the Creek Confederacy. So the estate of Georgia was established in 1733. 1751, the Board of Trustees who governed the colony from England legally permit slavery in the Georgia colony. So 1733, they banned slavery. By 1751, they decided we're going to play a medieval game legally. And we're going to permit enslavement of people based on color. So that's steps 1, 2, and 3. What I want to do now, and what I'm going to be doing for the next 13 weeks, once a week, as we close out the 400th year milestone, and as we go into the last fiscal quarter of the year 2019, I'm going to list a couple of points about Maroon history. Now keep in mind, these points that I'm going to go over on a weekly basis for the next 13 weeks, these points are the building blocks for American descendants of slavery. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done and proven. It's just been omitted from our history that we're taught in school. First point, our black skin became a badge of bondage. See, we have to understand Europeans are not Americans. They're not Native Americans. Europeans are not Native Americans. Native Americans are Americans that descend from slavery, as I mentioned earlier, because we were here prior to 1776. And also, Native Americans are those people who were already here living under different nations and under different confederations. You have the Iroquois Confederacy, you have the Creek Confederacy. There are a lot of confederacies that were on this land. We, as Americans, are the most ignorant on this land because we do not understand how powerful and how rich this land is. But we're going to learn over the next 13 weeks. So our black skin became a badge of bondage. So I'm born into this by default. I have no choice but to break this wicked system and this idea that you would set up a legal construct and operate a government where your skin color that you have no choice over can put you in slavery. And I happen to be born into a group that law applied to. And I'm not with that program. Let's get into the second point of Maroon history. Was a person escaping slavery seeking freedom or breaking the law? All my riders out there, all my Maroon Spirited people, all my dogs out there, let's chop it up for a minute and let's keep it real. Was a person escaping slavery seeking freedom or breaking the law? Remember, the European created a government, and the operation of the government was enslaving a group of people based on color. So if I'm not with that program and I escape from that system, am I breaking the law or am I seeking freedom? And if I'm breaking the law, and if I see it as I'm breaking the law, then that means the European is your Lord and your God. See, we're either going to go by the supreme architect of the universe and its laws and its order, or you're going to have a house Negro or a field Negro spirit, and you're going to go by the European being your Lord and your Savior. It's really just that simple, because under his law, he can legally enslave you. Point 3. Enslaving Native Americans and American descendants of slavery wasn't free of pain. See, we were told this lie that was a smooth operation. You shackle us at the feet and at the hands and around the waist. Sound familiar in today's society? Sounds like your family members that's in prison or your local county jails. You transport us. You took the chains and the shackles off. You put us at the camp. Sound familiar? Or the slave plantation. You designate based on our skills and talents, whether you put us in the house or you put us in the field. Once you put us in the house or put us in the field, we get the orders from the broken Negro on the pecking order, the way things work at that plantation. And then we live our lives earning nothing and passing nothing down to the next generation because we've been enslaved legally. That's the story we were told, but that's a lie. Europeans were not free of pain trying to enslave our group. European masters, this is point 4. Point 3 was enslaving Native Americans and American descendants of slavery wasn't free of pain. Point 4, European masters couldn't sleep at night, found it necessary to remain armed, used one race against the other. Let's think about that for a second. European masters couldn't sleep at night and found it necessary to remain armed. If they couldn't sleep at night, that means that rebellions were regular. And you know you were doing wrong. You couldn't sleep at night. Your profit that you were gaining from enslaving a group of people, you had no rest. You had no peace because you never knew when we were going to run up in your house and stop the madness. And you had to make sure that everybody was strapped up in your town or your city because, again, you knew it was just a matter of time before we stopped the madness. But you left that out of your history books when you were teaching us when we were little, right? That's where the Maroon spirit comes in. Those of us that never fit into that program, you wonder why we didn't go to history class, or we skipped school, or dropped out of school, or even went through school and just never really fit in society. It was just too, Those of us that our whole life always ask the question, everybody couldn't have been soft. Everybody couldn't have just went with that program. That's who this channel is for. If you're not feeling it, don't come over here. Don't stay over here. Point 5. Europeans lived in constant fear of any dark person, not knowing when revenge would take place. Absolutely. That goes on to this day. Growing up, a group of black men, the media portrays it. Oh, it's fearful. Yeah, it's fearful because you know what you've done and you fear the day that we make you pay. And that day starts October 1st, 2019. Game's over. Game is over. This will stop. Point 6. The first enslaved were the first to flee and rebel. Chains were meant to be broken. Well, we learn a little bit about this through Willie Lynch. Those of us that's read the Willie Lynch letter. The initial people that you tried to put in bondage, they immediately bucked the system. Immediately they bucked the system. Point 7. Maroons would escape with muskets, machetes, or gunpowder. So understand, we're working on your plantation. Whether we're house Negroes inside the house or we're field Negroes in the field, we're going to peep how your operation runs. It's no different than working on a job today. You're going to figure out the operation. So it's easy to plan the escape because we figured out how you operate. But when we plan that escape, we know that you're coming for us. So it makes sense that we would take weapons to defend ourselves. Point 8. Maroons knew their European masters' languages, defenses, and plans. Who knew more about the business tactics that Europeans were taking than the house Negro? The house Negro is in the house with you. He hears you doing business plans with other Europeans. He's taking care of your kids. He's taking care of your wife. He hears you talking. He hears everything that's going on. The real ones relayed that information to the field Negroes. The field Negroes learn the operation of how the field operated. He's getting operation from how the management class, or the house Negro is learning how the management class is going to handle the operations, which is the field class. And so, yeah, we knew all your ins and outs. That's how we was able to escape. That same concept applies today. This is the blueprint, people. The points that I'm reading to you, this is the doctrine from our ancestors that escaped bondage and built civilization. And we'll get into that within this 13-week period, but it's already been laid out with how they did it. All we have to do is just follow their blueprint, follow their lead. Point 9. The greatest threat to European domination were outlaw communities of Maroons, aka those runaways from slavery. The greatest threat to European domination were outlaw communities of Maroons. Here we go with that word outlaw again. Outside of whose law? Are we outside of the supreme architect of the universe's law? Or are we outside a human being's law? Well, we're clearly outside of European law. So the European is trying to play God over another group of people. That doesn't even make sense to me. And it didn't make sense in the 1600s, in the 1700s, or the 1800s. How do we know it didn't make sense? Because we have ancestors that fought in 3 Seminole Wars. Point 10. Outlaw slave colonies were called Maroon colonies. Yes, we had our own colony. They're not going to tell you that. If this is the first time that you're hearing this in your life, that's proof. The miseducation of the Negro is real. We had our own colonies on this land in the state known as Florida today. We don't have to go to Africa, right? That's one of the biggest tricks. See, teaching this history in the year 2019 means that we have to change our thinking and our behavior. See, we've been lied to, especially my generation. We've been focusing on Africa. We've been taught Egypt and Kemet, the pyramids in Giza. But we never learned about the pyramids that are right here in North America. Again, I'm going back. If we've been here 400 years, we need to know about the land that our ancestors have died on for the last 400 years. We cannot continue, we can't claim to be Americans and don't know anything about the land. So the biggest bait and switch that's been going on within our people is they've been diverting us to have us look at Africa and overlook all the history right in front of us, which is why I'm mentioning a black inventor, which is why these 12 practical steps of action are necessary for us to get our minds right. Point 11, Maroon colonies operated in remote, difficult to find, and hard to defeat locations. So we knew we were public enemy number one once we left the plantation. So the first thing we're thinking about is military defense. We had to set up shop in order to raise our families and take care of our elder in hard to find places, in remote, difficult locations. So you're fighting two wars in one if you want to come see about us. You got to fight the terrain, then you got to worry about us once you get in there. Makes sense to me. Point 12. Maroon colonies had to find safe places, plan a defense, feed and clothe their people, and provide a stable community. I want to repeat that. Maroon colonies had to find safe places, plan a defense, feed and clothe their people, and provide a stable community. This is the blueprint for us today. The first thing is find a safe place. But the most important thing is plan a defense. We've never been told to plan a defense. The only group on this land that has a defense will be the Nation of Islam. What do we see as our leaders amongst us? We have religious leaders. All other groups of people have military leaders. You see the bait and switch they did to us? They switched it up. They got us praying while they got guns and ammo. Our ancestors knew if we escape this plantation, no, let me rephrase that. When we escape this plantation and get away, the first thing we're doing is we taking machetes, guns, and gunpowder. We're going to find a safe place to set up shop, and we are going to plan a defense. We will not be vulnerable and be attacked without you going with us. That's a completely different mindset than the mindset that's going on in 2019, where our people are getting murdered on video. And we march and pray. We're off code. We're out of sync with nature. We have no protection. There's no organization that advocates for us. None. None. You can't go to the Urban League. You can't go to the NAACP. You can't go to your local church. There is no organization that advocates for us. But we have a fabricated class of people now called gays. Everybody is scared to say their name and don't dare kill one of them on video. They have a machine that's going to protect them. If you kill any European on this land, there is a machine in place to take care of them. There is even a machine in place in 2019 to protect illegal citizens. But there is nothing in place to protect our kids, our elders, or ourselves when things happen to us. Something to think about. This is the first broadcast. Again, this will be a weekly broadcast. The next one will be on October 1st, 2019, as we start off day one of the fourth quarter, 13-week fiscal program of action. We're lining ourselves back up with the world. You're going to hear the Federal Reserve give report. You're going to hear all kinds of businesses starting to come out with financial reports the first week of October. Why? The world is aligned on fiscal quarters. It's time for us to align on fiscal quarters and separate ourselves mentally and then by habit from the government. We're in a position right now in the 400-year milestone year. We've had a reparations hearing in the month of June, I believe, of 2019, which was a joke. You have actors and a Black Congressional Congress who also doesn't advocate for you when things get done to you. They have a bill called H.R. 40 in which they want to study reparations, okay, on behalf of our bloodline. But in the same year, the House of Representatives has passed a law to give gays reparations for those that couldn't get married and inherit. I'm sorry, we weren't able to inherit from 1776. And we've been here 400 years.